Good morning, everyone. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you. First, I'll conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I say your name, please confirm that you are with us. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Present.
Commissioner James Alessi.
Here.
Commissioner Tracy Edwards.
I am here.
Commissioner John Howard.
Here.
Commissioner David Valesky.
Here.
Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll move to the regular agenda. Our first item for discussion is item 301, case 20-E-0197, related to Con Edison's cost recovery to a clean energy hub. This will be presented today by Tammy Mitchell, Director of the Office of Energy System Planning and Performance. Accompanying her will be our General Counsel, Bob Rosenthal, Lekka Jono, Nicola Jones, Lilia Rant are all available for questions. Tammy, please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Item 301 relates to a request made by Con Edison by petition and supplement for cost recovery associated with what Con Ed refers to as its Clean Energy Hub, a 345 kV substation that it proposes to build in Northwest Brooklyn on company-owned property located adjacent to the East River and existing Farragut substation. The petition, filed on April 15, 2022, proposes a version of the hub that would act as a point of interconnection, or POI, for 6,000 megawatts of offshore wind, inject the energy from offshore wind into most of northern Brooklyn and parts of Manhattan and Queens, and cost an estimated $1 billion. The supplement, filed on December 13, 2022, proposes an alternate version of the hub, aimed primarily at meeting a projected load reliability need, which the company states is expected to arise in the summer of 2028. The supplement states that this version of the hub would otherwise act as a POI for 1,500 megawatts of capacity from any resource and have an estimated cost of $810 million. As way of background, Con Edison identified the hub as a potential CLCPA Phase 2 project in the Utility Transmission and Distribution Investment Working Group report, filed on November 2, 2020. The Commission first addressed the hub in its Order on Power Grid Study Recommendations, issued on January 20, 2022. In that order, the Commission noted that, based on information provided by Con Edison in the utility report and in response to information requests, the hub would be electrically tied to substations serving major population centers in Brooklyn and Manhattan, and could accommodate at least 3,000 megawatts of offshore wind generation. Based on the need to address the difficulty in building new onshore substations as POIs for offshore wind energy, the January 2022 order authorized Con Edison to file a petition seeking approval for Phase 2 cost recovery associated with the hub. In its order, the Commission specified that, among other criteria, Con Edison must address the project's ability to both accommodate energy from offshore wind and inject such energy into the New York control area, and the feasibility of routing alternating current transmission lines from each converter station to the hub. The Commission also specified that Con Edison must provide an engineering cost estimate associated with the hub proposal. And just to provide some further background, first, Public Service Law Section 66J, subsection 5, requires the Commission to create a program to require load-serving entities, or LSEs, to procure at least 9 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. The Commission's CES modification order, issued in October of 2020, complied with this requirement by authorizing NYSERDA to issue solicitations for up to 9 gigawatts of offshore wind renewable energy credits, or ORECs, and obligating LSEs to purchase those ORECs. Second, the power grid study prepared by DPS staff and NYSERDA in January of 2021 recommends that 6 of the 9 gigawatts of offshore wind interconnect into New York City. Third, NYSERDA has entered into OREC contracts for 4 projects, 2 of which are slated to interconnect into New York City. They are Empire Wind 1, an 816 megawatt facility with Gowanus substation as the point of interconnection, and Beacon Wind, a 1,230 megawatt facility with one of the Astoria substations as the point of interconnection. Therefore, the immediate need is to find POIs to support at least 4 gigawatts of offshore wind into New York City. Fourth, as noted in the January 2022 order, there are several feasibility issues associated with routing transmission cables through New York Harbor into New York City. Most are related to routing transmission cables through the Narrows and the East River. To restate, the January 2022 order directed Con Edison to provide specific details regarding the feasibility of using the hub as a point of interconnection for offshore wind. However, the petition filed by Con Edison pointed only to the New York ISO interconnection process as the mechanism by which the feasibility of interconnecting offshore wind energy to the hub would be addressed. The petition was noticed in the State Register and subjected to a public comment process, as well as a technical conference held on August 17, 2021. Many of the comments and conference participants addressed Con Edison's assertion regarding the feasibility of using the hub as a POI for 6,000 megawatts of offshore wind. For example, the New York Offshore Wind Coalition stated that the ability to run multiple submarine cables into the East River is a potential Achilles heel with the hub. Other offshore wind and transmission developers made a similar point. The draft order before you would deny the petition. Based on the record, the order acknowledges that interconnecting between 5,000 megawatts and 6,000 megawatts of offshore wind into Zone J may be difficult due to the scarce cable routing corridors, and highlights the need to preserve maximum efficient use of those limited corridors moving forward. On the other hand, the draft order also acknowledges the significant generator interest in using the Farragut substation as a point of interconnection. 6 offshore wind projects with a total capacity of 7,670 megawatts have identified Farragut substation located adjacent to the hub site as a potential POI in the New York ISO interconnection queue. However, Con Edison asserted that Farragut lacks the ability to be expanded, so any new POIs would have to be located at the proposed hub. While noting that the interest in using Farragut as a POI for offshore wind shows that some due diligence has been undertaken by offshore wind developers regarding the feasibility of routing transmission cables to the area of the hub, the draft order would deny the petition based on lack of details provided by Con Edison regarding the feasibility of interconnecting a full 6,000 megawatts into the hub. Let me next discuss the supplement to the petition, which again was filed on December 13, 2022, and offers a less expensive version of the hub aimed primarily at meeting a near-term projected local reliability need. As explained in the supplement, electric customer demand in the areas currently served by 2 distribution area substations in Brownsville, Brooklyn, is expected to increase significantly due to factors such as increased electrification from electric vehicles. To address the reliability need, Con Edison states that it must complete construction of a new distribution substation, which it calls Gateway, by the summer of 2028. The supplement explains that the hub is the only source of energy to Gateway that can be built by the summer of 2028 need date. Con Edison also notes that the hub would provide energy to 2 additional distribution substations that need to be built in New York City in the future. Additionally, the version of the hub proposed in the supplement would support points of interconnection for 1,500 megawatts, far less than the 6,000 megawatts associated with the version of the hub originally proposed, and would cost an estimated $810 million. Of note, Con Edison provided information in the supplement showing that building the hub focused on reliability only with no points of interconnection would cost $773 million, or $37 million less than the version proposed in the supplement, and that it would cost far more to include the POIs for 1,500 megawatts of capacity post-construction. Relatedly, New York City is going to need several 345 kV substations to address the projected increase in demand in any event. The supplement also proposes an alternative cost recovery mechanism based on Con Edison's acknowledgement that because the project's only certain use at this juncture is to meet local reliability needs, the Commission may determine that its cost should initially be paid by Con Edison customers only. The supplement specifies that should the Commission opt to have Con Edison customers pay for the hub, the company requests to make a filing at least 1 year prior to the project's in-service date to inform the Commission whether any offshore wind developers have expressed interest in using the hub as a point of interconnection. The supplement specifies that the future filing may request statewide load ratio share cost recovery for aspects of the POIs used for offshore wind energy. The draft order before you would grant the supplement. The record of the case and the projections established by Con Edison show that the hub is the only potential substation that can provide new supply to energize Gateway in time to meet the local reliability need in Brownsville. The record also shows that due to expanded load growth attributable to accelerated growth from electrification, 2 additional distribution area substations needed by 2042 could also be served by the hub. Indeed, much of the load growth projected in the power grid study would occur in New York City, creating the need for between 3 and 5 additional 345 kV substations in New York City to accommodate the projected increase in load. As noted, a reliability-only version of the hub, which would cost $37 million less, or 4.6% less, than the version proposed in the supplement, would not provide any POIs. The relatively small incremental cost of $37 million associated with the version proposed in the supplement would include relevant equipment to allow the hub to act as a make-ready POI for 1,500 megawatts of energy from any energy resource. Additionally, as noted, based on the projects in the New York ISO interconnection queue, there is an interest in using the Farragut substation as a POI for over 7,000 megawatts of offshore wind energy. Because the hub could act as an alternative to Farragut in this respect, this level of interest suggests that at least 1,500 megawatts of energy from any resource would use the hub as a POI. The order would note that because the version of the hub proposed in the supplement would be built primarily to maintain local reliability, the costs are recoverable from Con Edison's ratepayers only. The order would grant Con Edison's request to file a petition no later than 1 year prior to the hub's in-service date to request an alternative cost recovery mechanism associated with the hub, which would need to make a showing that the hub is to be used to interconnect renewable energy. The order, however, would note the Commission's skepticism regarding whether it would authorize Con Edison to seek alternative cost recovery for the aspects of the hub that appear focused on reliability. In other words, the $773 million associated with what Con Edison describes as the reliability-only version of the hub. Finally, the draft order addresses several rate-related issues. For example, to maintain transparency, the order provides an estimate of the rate increases associated with the version of the hub that would be approved in the order. The order also notes that the project scope detail and cost estimate accuracy for the proposed hub is a rate case quality submittal with a contingency of plus 30%, such that the cost estimate and schedule for the scope of work is reasonable for a capital investment that is proposed in advance of project-specific engineering. This concludes my presentation, and we are available for questions.
Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate the presentation and the work going into this. What I find interesting about this order is that it highlights the growing demand for electricity and the importance of making investments in a timely manner to meet these needs. Growing demand, driven in part by increased adoption and use of electric vehicles and electrification in general. And this highlights an important consideration that has come up frequently in the press, again, the need to make sure our investments keep pace with this progress, and the need to also make sure that these investments are coordinated properly and executed in a timely manner to maximize the benefits while minimizing frustration, both to consumers and to the industry and commercial interests alike. Commission actions leading up to this have anticipated these needs, and this order highlights how we can take proactive action in a situation that's constantly evolving. So given the clear and obvious reliability benefits and the additional potential benefits for future interconnection, I find this project aligned with the public interest and I'm in full support of it. Thank you for your presentation. I'll go to you, Commissioner Berman, for comments.
Thank you so much. First, I want to take a moment to thank staff for the good work that they've done with this. Uh, I, I look at this as what we have before us today is an item that is trying to address the reliability needs, local reliability needs that are ongoing. And for that, I think it's important, as we do look forward with the clean energy transition, we see that we're going to have increased electricity demand and needing to address that so that we don't put at risk reliability. But underscoring that needs to also be affordability and how that fits in with us as we're looking at the increased rate impacts, but bill impacts overall. I guess the question I have for staff, I do have a few questions, but the first one really is, I was struck that this went from the original petition, which was a phase 2, which is really looking more at CLCPA activities, and to then a supplement, which is really a phase 1, strictly focused on reliability. And I was struck that in looking through the parties' comments, both in the initial original petition and then at the technical conference and then in the supplemental petition, that it was somewhat confusing in terms of how we are going to be looking at this, because still on the table was the original petition rather than being withdrawn and a new petition, or the supplement taking complete place of the original petition. And I feel that the comments then were having to sort of balance, not knowing where we might go, rather than, sort of acknowledging where we are today, which is that the original petition is being denied. But in the original petition, and sort of the rationale has been focused on that the Con Ed did not provide, as requested, details on the feasibility. And I'm trying to really understand, why did they not provide details? Is it because they were unable to? Is it because the details might provide that it was likely unfeasible? So I'm just trying to understand a little bit of, was there analysis done on that in a way that really addresses what the inability to provide that sufficient detail for consideration was?
Morning, Commissioner Berman. So as far as I can see, the real challenge here is one of siting. So it's the ability to run these cables, through the Narrows, through the New York Harbor. I don't think Con Edison actually did an in-depth analysis of what's under the water and how you would get cables through there.
Okay. Going forward, are they going to have to do an in-depth analysis when they come back seeking other cost recovery and different mechanism? Will that be part of it? I'm just trying to understand sort of that next step of that.
So going forward, if this is approved, then Con Edison will construct this substation. In the meantime, if there are developers that want to use the Clean Energy Hub as a point of interconnection, they would address the ability, the feasibility of interconnecting their projects through their process. So I don't believe that it's really a Con Edison requirement going forward.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So it's clear that staff and Con Edison believe that the facility is needed for reliability. And to be clear, I do think that we have an obligation to ensure reliable electric service for Con Ed ratepayers in this case. My concern is that really on the end of future cost recovery, if I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around what is the sort of message that we're sending as to potential future cost recovery. And now the order, while I think it tries to lay out all the different scenarios, I don't know that it gives full certainty to folks in terms of what we may do further as to cost recovery, future cost recovery. We may look under Order 1000 competitive process. We may need to, extend this out further. We may need to do or examine whether we're going to do a load share type cost recovery alternative mechanism. And so it's too uncertain to me in future costs, lack of competitive process, and then the real sort of concern I have is, will this actually get built in time to address the local reliability needs? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
As far as the timing, according to the company, it is feasible to get this built in time to address the reliability needs. And staff will continuously monitor this project as we do other capital projects as well, as far as timing and costs and schedule.
Okay, thanks. I guess I'm looking also for what those challenges will be, and to make sure that there isn't sort of we're needing to understand what that looks like. The other thing that I think I was struck by is that in this case, it is in the draft order, but it also, some of the parties talk about tying feasibility to expressions of interest from offshore wind developers. And the draft order talks about future cost recovery, perhaps coming and showing that there's expressions of interest from developers. I think I'm left not feeling comfortable that we would tie feasibility to expressions of interest without something a little bit more. The reason for me is a lot of people can express interest in something, but what that actually looks like, whether it actually happens, and whether the expressions of interest are actually feasible, whether the expression of interest, is done in a way that is helpful to give us information. And so I don't want us to be left saying, yep, look, you got, significant interest here, so that means that it's feasible. Or, well, you got one really good interest here, so that's feasible. I don't know can you talk a little bit about that?
So if I understand the question, I think this draft order leaves that issue open for exactly the reasons you're talking about. Within the next few years, things are going to be happening. Transmission development is going to happen. There may be other public policy solicitations. We will see more detail about what the developers are proposing as far as points of interconnection and the feasibility of getting to those points of interconnection. And I think this draft order allows the commission to look at all the information we have in the future, including the rationale that the company needs to submit in order to determine whether that truly is a showing that these points of interconnection will be used.
Okay, thank you. And I think this might be a council question. What is it in terms of our next steps with the competitive process in Order 1000? Because a number of the parties do raise, I think, legitimate concerns that we are doing this outside of the competitive process.
So I'll point you to pages 31 and 32 of the draft order, which specifically addresses that point. Several of the parties, as you noted, including multiple interveners, NextEra, RISE, several other offshore and transmission developers raised that precise point. What the order says is that the NISO issued its most recent solicitation regarding public policy transmission needs, which is a competitive process, on August 31st, 2022. It's a biennial process, and the Commission plays its role in that process by taking comments that are provided in response to the NISO solicitation and putting them through the SAPA public comment process, which is done here. And then pursuant to that process, the Commission, once that process is completed, which it has been now, we have a fully submitted public comments, and now the Commission can act on all of the responses to the solicitation, including responses related to offshore wind transmission.
Okay, thank you. I guess where I come from on this is that I do understand Con Ed wanting sort of a guarantee on its return on equity. And as to the local reliability needs, if it's, if it's shown that it is needed and will be done for reliability needs, I can understand that aspect of it. I am concerned about the sort of unclear in whether or not we would fully look to a competitive process on future cost recovery, and perhaps also, not sort of relying on Con Ed to come back, but doing it really more as Con Ed, like anyone else, bidding into the process. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that the draft order largely agrees with, the precise points that you're making. I don't have the page number in front of me, but it actually, identifies the process and notes that Con Ed, there's nothing preventing Con Ed from, participating in either the NISO process or really even the NYSERDA process. If an offshore wind developer wants to use, Con Ed's ability, it can do that. It can join with Con Ed. There's nothing preventing that, and the order addresses that issue specifically.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate the clarity. For me, I'd like a little bit more clarity. I do think that this draft order tries to, proper way leave open different processes that may be available. I am hoping that the message from the draft order, if approved, really does sort of make sure that folks understand that we do see there are reliability needs, not just, from this, but overall. Costs are becoming an issue, and we need to look at really all different things, and we cannot just rely on, one utility. There's got to be several different approaches, all hands on deck, all tools on deck. And to the extent that, we do need to leave the door open on having true competitive processes available, and to make sure that we are not going down a road that limits that because of timing issues, and that, if there is a need for us to see the feasibility, we need that analysis, and that we really, are not looking at this to be born by the ratepayers without necessarily showcasing what they're getting for it. So with that, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. Commissioner Alessi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your thorough and detailed insights. By and large, I agree with the comments of the chair, and I don't have any further questions or comments at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, good morning. I just want to just have one clarifying point for me. So what we're doing in the supplement is, by and large, it's going to allow for the gateway to move forward, which is primarily for the electric vehicles. And it's going to provide 1,500 megawatts of the 5.6. Is that correct, Tammy?
So in this order, the commission would be approving the construction of Con Ed's Clean Energy Hub. That will be the supply to the Gateway distribution substation. And it's
That's the gateway, yeah.
correct. And the Clean Energy Hub would allow for 1,500 megawatts of points of interconnection for any source.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am very gratified at the work done on this particular order. I think it's the beginning of a real process change in providing. I even believe the word skepticism is actually in the order, that often the build it and they will come philosophy that began with this, particularly that this was purported to be exclusively is the wrong phrase, but in the majority was supposed to be a home for an offshore wind interconnect. But it is now devolved, because that was more of a wish than an actual plan. There is no plan for the Narrows as we speak. There is a plan to make a plan, but the technical and it's just going to be a very difficult process, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. But I view this now as the first step in Con Ed's. That we're very upfront about the needs that they believe in their own system to meet CLCPA goals in a decarbonized New York City and service territory. This $1 billion investment, more or less, is actually just 1/60th of their plan. 1/60th. So you can do the arithmetic, and you understand that the entire decarbonization plan and upgrading of the distribution system, in essence, what this helps enhance, is going to be a wildly expensive undertaking. One of the corollaries to this that I ask always, particularly related to New York City capital investments, is the impact of property taxes on this particular project. Tammy, I know I've talked to other staff about this. Can you tell us what we think the range of property taxes that will be paid just on this project?
So I'm going to defer to Jeff, I think, who has the numbers in front of him.
Terrific. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioner. So the currently the annual property tax for
Sorry, Jeff, hold on one second. Can we confirm that his mic is on?
the green light is on. You cannot hear me?
You're good? Okay. No, it's just coming up a little low.
Okay, I'll get a little closer. Currently, the annual property tax for utility plant in New York City is about 6% of the plant investment. So if we're talking about an $810 million clean energy hub project per the supplemental report, you're talking about $48 million a year of incremental property tax once this is fully constructed in service and hits the property tax rolls.
And that goes for years and years and years.
Yes, the amount, the balance of plant in service will change over time, will slowly be depreciated. And so you could expect it to have a slight decrease over time. But yes, for decades.
I just want to point out that $50 million times 10 times 20 is money that goes directly to the city of New York, does nothing to enhance reliability or decarbonization, is a general revenue tax of the city of New York. And I think on a going forward basis, as I said, this is 1/60th of the Con Ed capital plan. If you do the arithmetic on that, these numbers on the property tax impact are staggering. I think it really behooves the government of the city of New York and the state of New York, for that matter, that if we have to make these enormous investments in the local T&D systems, in this case, Con Ed's estimates are in excess of $60 billion. It cannot trigger a windfall in New York City property taxes based on their very unique and I believe onerous system of taxing utility property. Again, for those projects that are designed to meet CLCPA goals and to decarbonize the economy, I think we need to treat the property tax issues and general tax issues very, very differently than we currently do. But I think that was just an important point to make here. And again, we're at the beginning of a very long journey with this company and this process. And we have another order that we're going to talk about shortly. Will also be part of that same process. But again, I really do appreciate that staff cleared out the fantasy from what is really reality. And again, I look forward to that skepticism on future orders as well. But thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tammy, thank you for your presentation and to your entire team for the work that you've done on this item. I just have a couple of questions, and then just a general comment. First of all, in regard to the issue of reliability, which is paramount. So, in April of 2022, the company filed a Phase 2 project seeking cost recovery for a project that would deliver or that would interconnect 6,000 megawatts of offshore wind that spoke either not at all to local reliability or very little. 9 months later, a supplement comes in that is now based on local reliability. So I'm trying to, and that's not that long a period of time, it seems to me, for 9 months to pass. So I'm trying to think to myself, what could cause such a change in such a short period of time? Is it was the only things I've come up with? I'll ask you if either resonates with you or if I'm missing something. I suppose one explanation might be the company itself perhaps miscalculated and didn't see that potential local reliability problem at the time that they filed the initial petition last April. I suppose another example to the chairman's comments, perhaps we're doing so well on our electrification efforts, vehicles and otherwise, that even in only a 9-month period, a local reliability issue has appeared that wasn't there only 9 months before. Do either of those resonate with? I mean, something changed between April 2022 and December 2022, apparently, in regard to reliability. I'm just curious what that might be.
So let me just start, and then I'll hand it over to Tammy. So this is Bob Rosenthal. So the original petition, I would just say that there was a change in, let's just say, how they characterized the local reliability issue, and it was definitely raised in the petition. The hub was identified as the source of energy to the Gateway substation in the original petition. It was just that the original petition said the predominant need for the hub as a point of interconnection, but it will also have this ancillary benefit of providing energy to the Gateway substation, which, by the way, is now, a substation that's involved in the actual ongoing rate case. I would just say, to clarify, it was raised in the petition as, let's say, an ancillary benefit, and in the supplement, it was raised as the primary benefit.
Okay.
And the only thing I would add to that goes to your point about increased demand from electrification. I think it is increasing rapidly, particularly in this area. Con Edison and staff, we've been watching the load in this area for a long time. If you recall, we had the BQDM project some time ago, a non-wires alternative, because the load in that area was increasing. Recently, with the passage of CLCPA and Local Law 97 and all of our efforts on electrification, this area in particular is seeing a big impact from that, as well as from economic development, new customer load.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Second question would just be, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So the original petition, the original project, we were concerned, others were concerned that the Narrows and the East River may not be able to handle transmission cable capacity to carry 6,000 megawatts. The scalable version of the project in our okaying up to 1,500 megawatts, should there be the interest, that we're okay from a technical, geographic, the river itself, so that and you identified some of these comments or these concerns in your comments, Tammy. We're concerned about 6,000, but we're not necessarily we're okay with 1,500. Is that safe to say?
So I wouldn't say that necessarily. I think there still needs to be analysis done. What this order does is it would approve the Con Ed hub as a reliability project to serve Con Edison customer load, but it leaves open the possibility that within the time period that they're constructing it, that it is shown that it is feasible to interconnect 1,500 megawatts. So that there will be points of interconnection for that small incremental cost, and if in fact it's if anybody's able to reach it.
Okay, so the technical feasibility will still have to be shown between now and I think Commissioner Berman raised a version of this question earlier. Okay, that's helpful. Let me just say that I think, for an order where you had a number of choices to go, you had an original petition, you had a supplement. Within the supplement itself, you had reliability only, you had a scalable reliability option, cost recovery, you had options there. I think that you've landed in the right spot in terms of the options that could have been presented to us, and as such, I'll be supporting the item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I don't have any additional questions or comments. I do appreciate the presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll now call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to approve the cost recovery related to the Clean Energy Hub as described. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. We have sufficient votes, and the item is approved. Recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone, for your hard work on this. Okay. We'll now move on to our second item for discussion today. Item 302, case 23-E-0070, which relates to instituting a proceeding to address barriers to medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This item will be presented by Jennifer Robertson. With her is Zerai Hagos and Stephanie McDermott. Jennifer, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. The order before you today initiates a proceeding to address barriers to medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle charging infrastructure under case number 23E0070. The proceeding has two primary objectives. The first objective is to develop the policies and programs required to accelerate the adoption of medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles, also known as EVs, through supportive charging infrastructure. The second objective is to develop new proactive utility planning approaches that ensure cost-effective and timely investments in transmission and distribution infrastructure needed to serve the growing electric vehicle charging demand across vehicle duty classes. The transportation sector produces approximately 28% of New York's greenhouse gas emissions as per 2019 figures, making it New York's second largest emitting sector. Mass adoption of EVs, which are more efficient than fossil fuel-powered vehicles and do not produce tailpipe emissions, is crucial to reaching the state's goal of net zero emissions by 2050, as codified in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. To date, the Commission has implemented policies and programs with a focus on the needs of light-duty EVs. On April 16, 2018, the Commission initiated a proceeding to remove obstacles to EV adoption under case number 18E0138. Through this proceeding, on July 19th of 2020, the Commission issued the Make Ready Order. The Make Ready Order unlocks significant investment in supporting light-duty vehicle electrification. The Make Ready program's primary intent is to provide incentives to offset the cost of the infrastructure needed to prepare sites for electric vehicle charging. The program is implemented by the Joint Utilities of New York. The Make Ready program is sized to build out sufficient charging infrastructure to meet the state's goal of having 850,000 zero-emission vehicles on the road by 2025. The Make Ready program encourages charging station developers and site hosts to make efficient use of the existing utility infrastructure through the publication of load-serving capacity maps by utility service territory that identifies locations with existing capacity sufficient for EV charging. The Make Ready program also provides a modest future-proofing incentive of up to 10% of the site-specific Make Ready funding to support lowering cost modifications to prepare the site for future expansion plans. Additionally, the Make Ready Order authorized 3 programs aimed at advancing medium and heavy-duty EV adoption. The first of these programs is the Medium and Heavy-Duty Pilot, which funds utility-side Make Ready costs for chargers that support medium and heavy-duty vehicles. The second program is the Transit Authority Make Ready Pilot, which has dedicated Make Ready funding for 4 upstate transit authorities. Lastly, the order authorized the utilities to administer fleet assessment services that provide fleet operators with site feasibility and rate analysis to support electrification efforts. DPS staff filed the Make Ready Midpoint Review White Paper on March 1st of 2023. The comment period for the Midpoint Review White Paper closes on May 15th of 2023. Staff looks forward to coming before the Commission on this matter at a later date. On July 19th of 2023, in case 22E0236, the Commission established a framework for alternatives to traditional demand-based rate structures, which adopts the EV phase-in rate that blends in demand charges with a time-of-use rate as the charging station's load factor increases. As an immediate solution, utilities are to develop a 50% demand charge rebate for all commercial EV charging use cases upstate and only fast charging downstate until the phase-in rate is in place. The order also directed utilities to propose commercial managed charging programs that provide incentives or bill credits for participants who can shift their charging to the most beneficial time for the grid. The solutions adopted in this order reduce the impact of demand charges, which provides operational relief to fleets interested in adopting electric medium and heavy-duty vehicles, particularly while EV penetration remains low. The proceeding to address barriers to medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle charging infrastructure aims to expand upon the policies and programs authorized by the Commission with dedicated attention to the challenges faced by medium and heavy-duty electrification, as well as the need to proactively plan for the anticipated infrastructure needed to support mass vehicle electrification. Although proactive planning will address the charging needs of all vehicle classes, The high-capacity batteries and chargers, as well as the rigorous duty cycle associated with truck and bus electrification, underscores the importance of addressing this sector-specific challenges. The proceeding will also focus on the need of disadvantaged communities overburdened by diesel emissions from trucks and buses that increases the local air pollution that irritates respiratory systems and worsens asthma. The initiating order would allow for this proceeding to examine potential barriers to medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle charging infrastructure and address associated proactive utility planning needs in New York. The order contains an appendix with questions for stakeholders on this matter. Stakeholders have until May 22nd, 2023 to file initial comments, and a reply comment shall be filed by June 5th, 2023. Department of Public Service staff will expeditiously prepare white paper proposals addressing the comments received. The white paper, or white papers, will be subject to public notice and comment and will contain recommendations for the Commission's considerations. Thank you for your time this morning. Zoraia Hagos, Stephanie McDermott, and I are available for questions.
Thank you very much. I have a question about something you mentioned earlier. You said something about fleet assessment services that utilities would provide. Can you speak to that a little bit about the nature of those services?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So the fleet assessment services are authorized and are available through the joint utilities. They provide to fleet operators services around rate analysis and site feasibility for electrification. So those services are currently available for all fleets.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I'm remembering correctly, this is your first time before us today, so excellent job presenting.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you again for putting this together. I find it interesting that in the preceding order, we talked about the need for infrastructure to support our growing electric demands in part driven by adoption of EVs. And here we are talking about the need to further examine the things that we need to do to further accelerate their growth. And I think it's important to recognize that given the ambition behind our goals and a number of evolving activities which are influencing them. We see before us a growing consumer interest in EVs and an interest that's likely going to be further buttressed over time as new models become available and even further enhanced given the potential new EPA requirements concerning battery durability, which are currently under discussion. So we at the Commission, we monitor these things closely, and I look at this process as one of the many things that we are doing with that goal in mind, the goal of making sure that the efforts we put forth are supporting rather than hindering adoption of EVs and the deployment of charging stations throughout the state. So I look at this order, and I'm happy to see that we're going to continue our efforts to examine the best pathways for deploying EV charging infrastructure with an emphasis on medium and heavy-duty EVs in particular. I think it's going to be helpful to get the information from our various stakeholders and individuals involved in the sector, and through the actions outlined and those efforts, this is ultimately going to support our goals for having all new passenger vehicles in New York State be zero emissions by 2035. And that's an effort that aligns very closely, if not perfectly, with our overall efforts to decarbonize the economy. So thank you for putting this together. Looking forward to the outcome of the process. And with that, I'll go to comments from other commissioners, starting with Commissioner Berman.
Thank you so much, Chair. Kudos to Zoraia, Stephanie, and Jennifer, and all the other staff working behind the scenes on these issues. I do just have two minor process issues before I get into my substantive comments. One, the draft order does have footnote 11 referencing the Climate Action Council scoping plan. It's really just citing it to, some statistics as to emissions with transportation. And I just want to make sure that we're not adopting in any fashion the final scoping plan by the reference to that. Just really need to hear that, that's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. The intent of the footnote is just to cite the data, not to adopt anything.
Okay, great. That's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. The other is that process question is we reference in the draft order that there was filed a petition, this is footnote 17, on May 11th, 2022, by several parties who filed this joint petition highlighting the need that they requested for a statewide MHD Make Ready program and a comprehensive stakeholder process. And we, in the draft order, sort of direct those parties who filed the petition to use the forum that's now being set up here as the appropriate forum for participation. Is that correct, my understanding?
That's correct, Commissioner Berman.
Okay, great. With that, I just raise, I think that for me, in a sense, that petition and the comments that were there are important for them to sort of, to the extent that the parties feel now need to be moved over to this forum, while it's not going to be considered as a petition, to the extent that their comments are still viable after they read through the draft order, I do think that, in some fashion, we need to sort of have closure on that pending petition. And I do think that it shouldn't necessarily be on the parties to have to decide to withdraw it or to keep open. And I think because sometimes we keep open proceedings that we think are sort of dormant and then somehow they're revitalized, even while we may have other forums. I just, from a process perspective, would like to see sort of a more formal, the commission recognizes that that petition is no longer viable and moot to the extent that there are substantive issues that we are still addressing. The proper forum is now this case that we're opening. And so that we are effectively agreeing that that case matter shall be closed, but not necessarily prohibiting folks from raising those issues in this forum. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Thank you, Commissioner Berman. I'll note also that petition at this point is somewhat dated almost. We've kind of moved past some of the issues raised by the stakeholders. They asked for very specific modifications to the Make Ready program, and this proceeding will go above and beyond those specific issues.
Right, exactly. So thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So this is where I come out. I am for opening up this proceeding and establishing now this forum and process. I'm a strong yes. I think that staff has really worked diligently to try to come up with the next steps and the mechanisms in what this will look like in sort of a planning process. Electrification of the transportation sector does present us with a huge opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to improve air quality. That's a good thing. However, the challenge, the concerns for me to reap these benefits is that we will need to ensure that we have a safe, reliable, affordable, and sustainable electric supply. And as we see a greater EV demand, there's going to be huge pressure and increase in the need for us to ensure a reliable electricity supply is there. I think this item really tries to set the stage for a forum for stakeholders to try to address the electric delivery infrastructure needs of the transportation sector, and tries to do it in a fast track way while being prudent in what we're doing and how we're doing it. It's an issue that, and it clearly from looking at the petition that was filed back in May of 2022, that folks clearly are engaged in and passionate on the issue. I will be looking to see those petitioners if they feel comfortable now with this forum as the opportunity that they've been seeking, and sort of the ability now to help us in shaping what the next steps look like. I think it's really important that we focus on a balanced forward movement, because while we do need to move fast on a lot of things, we need to maintain reliability, affordability, and again, doing this in the framework of a transparent, collaborative process that people feel their voices were heard, even if ultimately perhaps not completely granted all the different things that people may ask for, but that they feel like the process worked to get us all to a good collaborative end process. So for me, what I would like to also see is that as you move forward in the next steps and in the forum and the planning process, I'd like to see a broader focus also in making sure that it's not just those who are focused on EVs, but that we really also make sure we bring into that others who care about, with the greater EV demand or other electricity demand, energy demands, that they're focused on what it means for the technical aspects, the logistical aspects, and the cost aspects of the need for a reliable electricity system. Because I think that too often when we have some forums that are strictly focused on one thing, we don't get the fuller picture outside of that. So I'd like to ask staff to try to really focus on bringing under the hood those folks who could help sort of shape it from that technical perspective, that may be helpful. So that's my request. You don't have to answer now. Just keep it in mind. The other thing is that as we move forward with what I see as truly a proactive planning process, there are going to be other things that will come and be asked to be considered in this. And there may be too much of a laundry list, but to the extent that there are important things that are on that list, the need to make sure that we prioritize and we give clear signal on where some of those planning processes or substantive issues may get dealt with, that will have to directly or indirectly tie back in to what we're doing, so that folks really feel like we are not just saying, oh, that's for another thing, not here, right? But that we're really trying to do linkage between the different processes of all of our proceedings. And with that, I also think that as we are going forward, it really has to be considered in the larger context of distribution system upgrades and what that looks like. And again, trying to really understand it and make sure that we're dealing with reliability, affordability, and safety. Now, safety is a big issue for all of us. It is Dig Safely Month, and while this may seem outside of the scope of an EV proceeding, I do pause because every utility, every contractor, every person that is engaged in something where they are needing to dig in the ground needs to be aware of 811 and proactively engage. So I do want to flag this as an issue that may not get sort of looked at, or thinking that it's not sort of in an EV space, but as it concerns EV charging infrastructure and the putting in of EV chargers, it's really important that we remind folks and that those that are engaged in it that, New York did pass a law in 2018 that requires all contractors who do excavation work to complete 811 training. And I just want to ensure that our charging contractors are proactively educated on these issues. And I believe it's truly imperative that we ensure that they have access to and are engaged in further education and training for safety-related concerns, and that should be considered, even if it seems like low-hanging fruit, as staff is looking at developing a proposed program and different issues, because I do just want to make sure that we include that safety concern and other safety concerns that may be there. So is my request. So thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. I'll go to comments from Commissioner Elise.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be supporting this. I appreciate the effort and the time, expertise that goes into this report, as well as pretty much everything that comes before us. So thank you. I am going to be supportive of it, recognizing all of the components of your report. But the one thing that pleases me and continues to please me as we pursue eliminating carbon from our atmosphere is that there's a continuing thread that recognizes that our disadvantaged communities have been left behind in the past, and we all recognize now and have been for the recent past that there are extremely high asthma rates in those areas. And so with all of the good things in your report that we hope to achieve, I'm very gratified to know that we'll continue to focus on that problem of asthma and our disadvantaged communities. So that's good for me. I'll be supporting the effort.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. I just have, Jennifer, I have a question. If you think about the proceeding, the petition that we approved just prior to this one, 301, is there anything that you think that we will be doing differently once we move forward with the policies and programs and planning approaches? Is there anything that you think, because it's so close and we're doing them at the same time, is there anything that you think we could be doing better or you would like to see us include in this at all?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Edwards. At this point in time, we, I think, need to think through where no-regret sites are located for medium and heavy-duty vehicles in particular, knowing that fleets can move over time, but highway rest stops are more likely to stay there for decades to come. The timeline for interconnection and upgrades for some of those sites to get the charging infrastructure needed can be upwards to 5 years in some cases. So this proceeding will be directly addressing those issues. But I think that we need to hear from stakeholders on where our efforts should be really siloed and most effective.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good job.
Commissioner Edwards, if I could just add one detail to that
please.
response, because everyone's kind of noting the similarities between the strategy we're trying to implement through this proceeding and the item just previously. So I looked at the activity in the Con Edison areas surrounded the Brownsville substations that were addressed in that previous item. And what we saw is there's about 1,500 charging ports in the queue right now, totaling about 30 megawatts of load that, really just are recent applications that came into the Make Ready program. And so while we don't know exactly what we'll be doing with that information, there is information available to the utilities and to stakeholders that could be used to be more proactive. And I think it's just a wonderful example of the type of insight that we could use to be more proactive than just in time with how we address planning and especially with advanced clean trucks, larger freight vehicles and larger battery capacities, the magnitude of these increases and the short time span in which they're going to show up is just going to continue to grow. So just wanted to make that additional clarification.
No, thank you. Thank you both. Great work.
Oh, sorry. Let me repeat myself. My mic was off. Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner Howard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Jennifer, first of all, I want to say it's a real pleasure working with as a relatively new staff person. We got to spend some time together last week, and I think we covered a lot of ground. Like just about everything we do here, there's sort of two challenges here. First is the technical and engineering challenges. How do we actually get enough wires and power to various sites to do any variety of things? In this case, charging heavy and medium duty vehicles. And the second one is fiscal. It's about the money. And I've shared this with you personally, Zerai, probably more than a few times. I'm particularly concerned about how we handle the fiscal implications of serving large fleets. And they sort of fall into two buckets, the large fleets. The government-owned fleets, transit vehicles, or in so many sanitation vehicles, construction vehicles, a variety of other heavy and medium duty vehicles that are necessary to do the work of government. And the second part is private fleets. Everything from delivering soft drinks and beer to the packages that show up mysteriously at our house every day, and everything else. Remember, at the last mile, everything goes in a truck. So, and this is where it gets there. As we do this exercise, we have to be very mindful of what needs to be financed by the government, in this case, transit agencies, or any other aspect of government that is a responsibility of the government. And then with private fleets, often operated by very profitable private corporations. What is their responsibility on financing this program? And to minimize, wherever possible, in some cases exclusively, the impact on all ratepayers. Again, this is a program to fulfill a policy need created by the CLCPA, which is totally silent on how we pay for anything. And in this case, we know, for instance, I use the MTA because it's easy. It's going to cost a lot of money to not only purchase the EV, the electric buses and other vehicles, but the changing the infrastructure both at the distribution side of the equation, getting the electricity to these fleet charging opportunities, and then on the fleet owner side to do the infrastructure work necessary for them to actually get it done. To wherever extent possible, those need to be paid through transportation revenue streams, not through utility shareholder or ratepayer revenue streams, wherever possible. This is an opportunity where we could just use our utility bills as de facto tax increases for other aspects to serve by other aspects of the government. And for those on the private side, I absolutely believe that electrification will be part of doing business in this state. And if you need to deliver beer and potato chips and groceries or whatever, this should be on your nickel to wherever extent we can, and not be subsidized to a great extent by utility ratepayers. So I think that those two aspects, the technical one is hard enough, but the fiscal one is in many cases intractable, particularly when we try to save MTA fares and forever frozen, who already admit they have no money for their current operating program. So again, I think that analysis needs to be very clear that in order to serve these entities, it's going to take this sort of technical undertaking, but we really need to know with great precision how much it's going to cost. And that way, this commission can allocate those costs appropriately. And then maybe the legislature, in their wisdom, will also allocate state revenues appropriately as well. But again, I look forward to this. Jennifer, welcome again. This is not going to be easy, but I'm very confident in our staff to get this done. But thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer, Zerai, Stephanie, good job on this item. Appreciate the work that you've put forward here. I have no comments or questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for the presentation, and thank everybody for their work on this. And Jennifer, welcome aboard. I don't have any questions. I do want to just comment briefly that I'm encouraged by this order, and I'm encouraged that we're at the point in human history where this type of order is prudent. Achieving our clean energy goals depends in part on infrastructure that doesn't exist yet, and we address that in different ways every month, and the staff addresses it every day. It also depends in part on technology that continues to evolve, and put a different way, technology that doesn't exist yet either. And whenever we have an item that relates to electric vehicles in some way, I think back to a documentary that I saw a few years ago called "Who Killed the Electric Car?" And I think about how amazing it is that that documentary was released in 2006, and that the premise of that documentary doesn't really make sense anymore. And that's a good thing. So I find this encouraging, and I think it speaks to the importance of the type of work that we're doing. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the order. I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll now bring us to a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of initiating the proceeding to address the barriers to medium and heavy-duty EV charging infrastructure as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendations adopted. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on the consent agenda today? We'll begin with Commissioner Berman.
Yes, thank you. I just have some quick comments to make on a couple of the items. In item 261 and 263, these are both seeking to extend the maximum suspension period and to be made whole for the delay from pending rate case proceedings. In 263, there were a significant number of comments asking us to either deny outright the extension and the make whole, or to deny or limit in some fashion the amount of time we give for the make whole provision and extension. I just really want to comment that I really understand the frustration of interested parties in rate cases, and in this one, in 263 in particular, both multiple interveners and NICOR, who raise concerns with the make whole aspect of it because of what that means in impact on rates. And I do think that while I understand the frustration, we definitely have to sort of look at it in the context of the public service law and the obligation to decide a rate matter in 11 months. And when we have historically, pre-COVID, when we have granted extensions, it generally had historically been for 1 month at a time, and tried to really sort of hold everyone to resolving the issue in a timely period, and granting that extra month really gave people that sort of shorter time to decide it. And then I've noticed sort of over the last several years, and it seems tied to me to having been increased during COVID. You know, we dealt with a lot during COVID. We had a lot of different mechanisms that we did to help keep rates, you know, at a standstill. And I think that caused also what we have now, which is tied in with our state policies, really difficult rate increases, you know, matters that are before us for decision. And so that's caused an uptick, I think, in, you know, people, you know, wanting us to deny outright the rate increases. And also it's caused us to sort of get off track with these extensions and granting them seemingly for longer periods of time and more routinely in a continuous process. But it's also, I think, causes me concern when I see in a pending petition asking for an extension of time and to be made whole, where I see parties saying, you know, don't, and sort of getting confused between that and the rate case and the settlement discussions there may or may not they be involved in where they land. And it also may wind up that we're going to see more only staff and the company settling. And historically, we tried to have a much more broader party signing off on the settlement discussions. And that's been something I think that has been helpful. I don't have the answers, but I do think that we need to sort of look at what we can do to make sure that we go back to, you know, pre-COVID timeframes where we are looking at these extensions of time on just, you know, 1 month if necessary, and really trying to hold feet to the fire, making sure that staff is helping with that, but also to the extent that we are understanding that we may need to figure out what it is that we have to do from an education perspective, and also a collaborative perspective in parties who may come in with single issues, that if the answer is, well, we're not going to give you what you want for that single issue, then it's I'm not going to settle. And how do we balance that in a way that helps folks feel that their voices are heard, but understand sort of the broader rate case look that needs to happen. And if we then do have settlements, joint proposals that come before us, which are just staff and the company, what are the metrics, what are the things that we're looking at to see that there was valid attempts or viable attempts to get other parties, and what was missing? Because it may be that, you know, the moving forward on the settlement without other parties signing on, where before it used to be historically seen as, you know, this isn't good, there may be now at least showcasing that attempts were made and that this is where parties were and there was a parting of the way. And that may require some more logistics before people go into the settlement discussions for understanding. It also may require the settlement judges being given, the tools to hold people a little bit more accountable. And that includes our staff, and then helping sort of flush that out, and that timeframes and deadlines are really important, so that whoever is in the room in settlement discussions need to be the ones who can also give the final sign off, or get that pretty quickly in terms of their ability to move forward. So, and I do just want to say, I think it is only fair that if a company under the current statute is willing to consent to an extension, and we see that it is viable to continue to engage in settlement discussions, it's only fair that they be made whole. And want to remind folks, at least where I sit, it has always been historically, that getting to a settlement is better for the consumer than us entering into litigation or 1-year rate cases. That has not seemed to produce necessarily a consumer-friendly outcome. And in fact, there are a lot more challenges in logistics and fiscal implications doing that. And so we should be still erring on productive settlement discussions that lead to a joint proposal. So that's 261 and 263. 364, which is the emergency response plans, I will be concurring. I just want to raise sort of two comments on that. First, kudos to staff. You continue to amaze me with the collaborative process on emergency response plans, and all that comes. And there's been a lot more that's been sort of put into the emergency response plans. And my concurrence really is because some of what's now going into the emergency response plans are related to newly enacted laws, including Section 73, dealing with the customer credits and reimbursements, as well as utility responders from travel bans. There's going to be a cause and effect on rate pressures from a lot of the new things that go into the emergency response plan, as well as that have come out also in addressing, sort of lessons learned from storms, but also new requirements like cybersecurity and other things. And we have other proceedings that are addressing, the climate resiliency as well, that will also sort of impact emergency response. So I recognize that Section 73 is being, and consumer credit issues are being incorporated here, but we do have some pending litigation around that. And so I take pause because I had dissented when we had agreed to Section 73, and believe strongly that my rationale for the dissent for me was appropriate. And then the second is the utility responders from travel bans. We do need to monitor that and make sure that when there is a response to an issue on the ground, that we are seeing if there are any hiccups in folks being able to, utility responders being able to travel, even though there's a travel ban. Are there people that are is there miscommunication in terms of, what that means? Are the right people doing it? How do we make it more accessible so that we're not trying to go through sort of, bureaucracy while we need the utility responders to be able to effectively get there ASAP? And how this also impacts, I know there's been filings from the telecom folks on their emergency response plans. I don't know that the law is that clear on exactly who falls into a utility responder. And so we need to sort of make sure that we have the flexibility to work with folks, because on a given event, it may be different people who would be not seen initially as the technical person for utility response, but based on the event that happens, they may have to qualify, even if at first blush they didn't seem that. How do we deal with that issue? So that's just what I want to raise on 364. On 372, I am a yes, but I just want to raise an issue. This is the approval of selling the the building and property, granting a permanent easement for the parking lot of a facility. But there is a footnote here on page 4, actually 2 footnotes, 4 and 5, that just made me take a little pause, because we had a pending matter that was essentially dormant from 2007. We issued, the commission that was here at the time had issued a 2007 order that the company then petitioned for rehearing in 2007. And the case did not get closed until March 27th of 2023. And it was closed at the company's request because we're now addressing the issues in this present petition. I do think we do need to recognize that there are pending petitions that are out there. Some clearly people would identify as dormant. Others people are waiting desperately for us to decide them. And what the logistics of that looks like, and what are we doing to, one, make sure that we properly resolve and close cases as needed, but also to the extent that there are cases or petitions that are pending that may require at least us affirmatively deciding to give some kind of indication of when or when not that it may come to the commission. And as we saw in some of the other cases today, petitions were filed that we moved into different proceedings. So I just raised that. And then on 374, I am a no on this item. I do recognize that there may be some benefit to what we're doing here, but we also have to recognize more holistically some unintended consequences. On page 5, we talk about the ACP payments. Hold on for a second, I'm sorry. And here it says that the petition highlights that the proposed approach would eliminate the need for ACPs. NYSERDA would only collect enough funds to meet its contractual requirements for a compliance year, plus any commission-approved administrative adder. At first blush, that may seem like a good thing. However, there may be some unintended consequences. One that comes to mind to me is we have traditionally done some orders with moving CES monies from one program to another and saying, there's no fiscal impact because it's not new money, it's just money that we're repurposing. We're going to have less of that. That's one unintended consequence, perhaps a good thing, but it does mean that we need to kind of look more holistically at CCS. The other is, for me, the implementation plan doesn't come back to the commission. I always believe, even though it may take a little bit longer because you have to SAPA it and then get it to the commission for a decision, that I do believe that by having the implementation plan out there, SAPA for people to comment on, and then for the commission to weigh in, it does give us at times a better work product, or at least flushes out some of the unintended consequences and helps to refine the implementation plan commission-led rather than worked through between staff and NYSERDA. But I do also recognize that there is going to be a biannual review of the CES starting next summer, which will give the commission an ability for us to do a comprehensive review of the CES, which I think is helpful. It'll also give us an ability to look at load share issues as well, which I think is appropriate. So with that, I have nothing further, and I'll be a no on 374. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Elise.
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing to add.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Edwards.
No, I do not have anything to add.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Howard.
Yes, there are two items. First, on 369, I will be voting no, consistent with my previous votes. And item 374, I'll also be a no. However, I do recognize there's aspects of it that provide some incremental benefits. However, the underpinning still being a load share ratio scheme that I find wholly unacceptable. So with that, those are my two comments, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very brief comment on item 261, similar to Commissioner Berman's comments on 261 and 263. Specifically, though, to 261 Con Ed, certainly in 301, we took an action that will eventually, not right away, but eventually have an impact on Con Ed ratepayers. 261, we already do, of course, have a joint proposal that is signed certainly by more parties on the electric side than the gas side. And while I'll be supporting this item, I'm hoping this is the last suspension that we will see. The further out we get, the greater the impact of compression, so that the impact will potentially be much more dramatic in that first year when we take that up. So again, 261, I will be supporting the item, but do want to say that it's my hope that this will be the last extension that will come before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Major.
Thank you. I'm going to comment on two items. The first is 263, and I have some sentiments that are similar to what Commissioner Berman expressed. I try to always familiarize myself with the public comments, and I thank everybody from the public that takes part in these processes. There were many comments on this item period. The vast majority of which I don't think are pertinent to the order that's before us today. Of those comments that do speak directly to what we're voting on today, there was one letter in particular that stuck out to me that speaks on behalf of several advocacy groups. And I found myself in sympathy with the sentiments behind the letter. There's actually three versions of the letter. That said, I don't see how voting no would move the process closer to where these advocates would want to end up. In fact, I think a no vote would move in the opposite direction. So while I'm sympathetic with the underlying sentiments, I'm going to vote yes. The second item I'd like to touch on is 364, the emergency response plans. And I have two recommendations I'd like to make, and I'd like to, before I do that, acknowledge the work that Kevin Wisely and his team does to review these plans. The first comment I'd like to make is these are very voluminous plans. They get amended the month that we vote on them. So these plans were amended this month. And the recommendation I'd like to make is that where possible, we enhance the consistency of format and language so that like things are described in like language. And the reason I'm saying that is where there's a deviation, when different utilities are talking about the same thing in different ways, if there was greater uniformity, it would be easier to tell if differences were on purpose, or if the utilities are just using their own language to describe the same thing. So I would encourage, as we go forward, in the future, we review these on an annual basis, that we move towards greater consistency in both the format and the language. The second recommendation I'd make is, several of these plans make reference to specific events, including storms that have taken place in the past. And they're referenced in terms of how the plans have been amended in the past as a result of circumstances that were either unique or particularly severe as a result of a particular storm. I think that we in the state of New York experienced a storm in December of last year that principally affected Western New York and also parts of the North Country. That from my experience in dealing with storm response seems from afar to have had some unique or atypical features that I think it's worth all utilities to review that storm, as well as the response of the utilities that were in the service area that was affected, and just review their plans as we go towards next year to see if any additional adjustments make sense in light of those events. I am going to vote yes, and again, I want to thank everybody who worked on reviewing those plans. Other than that, I have no additional comments. I'm going to vote on the entirety, vote yes on the entirety of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now move to call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I vote yes, except 364, I concur, and 374, I'm a no. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes on all items with the exception of item 369 and 374, or I'm a no.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
And Commissioner Majori?
Yes on all items.
Thank you, everyone. The items are approved and recommendations are adopted. Thank you all. Madam Secretary, is there anything else before us today?
There's nothing more today.
All right. Thank you very much. And with that, I will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you, everyone.